I nearly spat out my coffee when I saw the Zillow notification, lakefront property for sale, prime waterfront lot. At first, I thought it was a glitch. Then I zoomed in. That wasn't just any lake. It was my lake, the one my dad taught me to skip stones on, the one where I'd proposed to my wife under the fireworks last 4th of July. And the seller? Karen Whitmore, the HOA president who'd fined me last month for excessive birdseed distribution. My hands shook as I clicked the listing. Tranquil private lot perfect for development, it read, with a photo of our dock photoshopped out. That's when the rage hit. Karen didn't even own this lake. It was communal property. I stormed to my office, deed records pulled up in minutes. The sneaky which had somehow registered a sliver of shoreline under her name years back, and was now selling it to some developer who'd fence it off. I could already hear the bulldozers, see the NO trespassing signs. My phone buzzed, a text from my neighbor Jake. Dude, is Karen really selling the lake? The neighborhood group chat was exploding. That's when I did something reckless. I called my lawyer, then my banker. If Karen wanted to play dirty, I'd play smarter. By midnight, I'd made an offer. Not on the lake. On Karen's actual house lot. The revenge plan? Simple. I'd own the land beneath her feet, then evict her. But I had no idea Karen had a backup plan, and it involved the cops. The morning after I bought Karen's lot, I woke up to the sound of furious pounding on my door. There she stood, her perfectly manicured nails practically digging into my doorframe. Face redder than the violation notice stickers she loved slapping on everyone's mailboxes. "You think you're clever?" she hissed, waving a copy of the property transfer in my face. I just leaned against the doorframe, sipping my coffee extra slow, just to watch her eye twitch. "Actually, Karen, I think the county records office thinks I'm clever, since they approved the sale and all." That's when she dropped the bomb. The HOA bylaws prohibit hostile takeovers. I nearly choked on my coffee laughing. Hostile takeover? Karen, this isn't a corporate merger, it's karma. I watched with satisfaction as she stormed off, her designer heels clicking angrily down my driveway. But the real show started when the first patrol car rolled up an hour later. The officer looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, as Karen dramatically pointed at my brand new HOA Karen's, a loud sign I'd installed right on the property line. "That's harassment," she shrieked. The cop sighed, rubbing his temples, and asked me for my side. I simply handed him the property deed and a printed copy of the HOA rules, which said nothing about signs on private property. As the officer explained this to Karen for the third time, I could see the exact moment she realized she'd lost this battle. But what I didn't see coming was her next move, because while I was busy celebrating my small victory, Karen was on the phone with someone much more dangerous than the cops, the local news. The Channel 7 News van rolled into our quiet neighborhood like a storm cloud, and suddenly everyone was a star in Karen's ridiculous reality show. She'd somehow convinced them this was about elderly harassment, rather than her trying to sell community property. I watched from my window as she fluffed her hair and practiced her victim face in the reflection of the news van. Reporter Mike Carter, a guy who usually covered drug busts and weather disasters, looked like he'd rather be anywhere else as Karen launched into her performance. This millennial bully is destroying our peaceful community with his vulgar signs and intimidation tactics. The camera panned to my sign, which honestly looked pretty professional for something I made at 2 a.m. What Karen didn't plan. Our neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez marching right up to the camera with her walker, her voice shaking with anger. This woman tried to sell our children's fishing spot to developers. Then Jake appeared holding printed Zillow listings, showing Karen had secretly sold 3 other community spaces over the years. The reporter's expression changed from bored to, "I might win an Emmy for this," as more neighbors poured out with documents and stories. Karen's perfect victim narrative was crumbling live on air when suddenly, the mic picked up her hissing at the cameraman. "You're supposed to be on my side. I'm friends with your station manager." The gasp from the crew was audible. Mike Carter's eyebrows nearly hit his hairline as he slowly turned back to the camera and said the words that would trend on Twitter by dinner time. Well, this just got interesting. But the real fireworks started when the HOA board president emerged holding a thick folder labeled Whitmore violations, and the entire neighborhood collectively realized we'd been played for years. The Channel 7 broadcast hadn't even finished airing before our neighborhood became ground zero for what Twitter dubbed #KarenGate. By sunset, a crowd had gathered outside the HOA office carrying printed Zillow listings like protest signs, while Karen's $1 million smile from the Welcome to Lakeview Estates billboard now looked downright sinister under the flashing camera lights. What nobody expected was the arrival of a sleek black Mercedes with tinted windows. Out stepped Richard Caldwell, the developer Karen had been secretly negotiating with, looking like he'd rather be swallowed by the earth than face 50 furious homeowners. Mrs. Rodriguez's grandson, a law student, already had his phone live streaming as Richard nervously admitted. Ms. Whitmore assured me she had exclusive rights to all waterfront properties. The collective gasp was so loud it scared birds from the trees. That's when HOA board member Mr. Peterson dropped the nuclear option. A decade's worth of hidden meeting minutes proving Karen had systematically voted to reclassify community land as private every time someone complained about her rose bushes blocking lake access. But the real mic drop moment came when Jake's tech-savvy wife pulled up Karen's Pinterest board titled My Future Waterfront Mansion, complete with architectural plans for a mega home exactly where our community dock stood. The crowd's rage turned to something darker, more dangerous: laughter. Because pinned beneath the blueprints was a comment from 6 months ago. Can't wait to get rid of those noisy fishing kids. Liked by none other than Richard Caldwell's account. Just as the mob started chanting recall, recall, a police cruiser pulled up, not for Karen, but to serve Richard with a subpoena. Turns out our local DA had been investigating shady land deals for months. As officers led a pale Richard away, Karen made her last mistake. She lunged for the HOA documents, tearing them in half right in front of the still-rolling news cameras. The reporter's shocked "Ma'am, that's evidence," echoed across the now-silent crowd. In that moment, even her staunchest supporters on the board took a visible step back. The camera caught it all: the trembling hands, the smudged mascara, the way her designer purse slipped from her shoulder as she realized this wasn't a HOA meeting anymore. This was a reckoning. The sound of tearing paper might as well have been a gunshot in the deadly silence that followed. Karen stood frozen, the shredded HOA documents slipping from her fingers like confetti at the world's worst party. For the first time since I'd known her, the queen of the neighborhood looked small. The Channel 7 camera zoomed in mercilessly as a single tear cut through her perfectly contoured cheek. But the sympathy train had long left the station. What happened next was something out of a movie. Mrs. Rodriguez's grandson shouted, "That's destruction of evidence," just as 2 more police cruisers pulled up, this time with detectives. The lead officer took one look at the shredded paperwork at Karen's feet and sighed like this was the 3rd Karen-related call of his shift. It was. Meanwhile, Richard Caldwell was already in the back of a squad car frantically texting someone, his forehead gleaming under the streetlights. But the real surprise? The HOA board members suddenly developed a spine. The treasurer rushed inside and emerged with a locked file box, shouting, "I've been keeping copies of everything," like she was in a spy thriller. The crowd actually cheered. Karen made a break for her Lexus, but Jake and some of the other neighbors had already parked their golf carts in a makeshift barricade, our neighborhood's version of citizen's arrest. As the detective started reading Karen her rights, the most surreal thing happened. The news crew's live feed cut to a commercial, but not before catching my "NO Karen's" a loud sign perfectly framed in the background of the shot. By the time the handcuffs clicked, Karen's carefully constructed empire of petty tyranny had crumbled harder than the gluten-free cookies she always brought to HOA meetings. But just when we thought the drama was over, the detective turned to the crowd and asked the question nobody saw coming. "Now, who wants to explain about the missing HOA funds?" The look on the board members' faces told me this story was far from over, and the next chapter might involve something shadier than illegal property sales, maybe even jail time. The moment the detective mentioned missing HOA funds, you could have heard a pin drop in that crowd. Then suddenly, it was like someone flipped a switch and unleashed pure chaos. Board members started shouting over each other, pointing fingers like it was a corporate Hunger Games, while Karen sat handcuffed in the back of the squad car, her face pressed against the window like a kid who just got caught stealing candy. But the real showstopper? When meek little Mrs. Chun, The HOA secretary, who always brought homemade cookies to meetings, pulled a USB drive from her sweater sleeve and handed it to the detective with shaking hands. "I've been tracking the discrepancies since 2019, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the growing murmur of the crowd. The detective plugged it into his laptop right there on the hood of his car, and as the spreadsheet flashed up on screen, even the cops gasped. Line after line of suspicious transfers, $500 to landscaping that never happened, $3,000 for security upgrades to a system installed 10 years ago, and the real kicker, monthly $2,500 payments to a company called KW Consulting. The detective slowly turned to Karen, whose face had gone the color of curdled milk. "Karen Whitmore, is there something you'd like to tell us about your side business?" Before she could answer, Richard Caldwell started banging on his squad car window from the inside, screaming that he'd cooperate fully if they let him out right now. That's when we noticed the Channel 7 helicopter circling overhead. Apparently, our little neighborhood drama had gone national. The board treasurer collapsed onto the curb, moaning about how Karen had threatened to have her deported if she ever spoke up, never mind that the woman was born in Ohio. But the absolute piece de resistance? When the detective scrolled to the bottom of the spreadsheet, and we all saw the total embezzled, $217,836.42, almost exactly the price of that waterfront mansion Karen had pinned on Pinterest. As they hauled her away, the crowd spontaneously broke into applause. But I couldn't stop staring at that number flashing on the laptop screen. Because here's the thing, our HOA fees were about to get a whole lot lower, and I knew exactly how we should spend the recovered money. The day Karen Whitmore was sentenced became an unofficial neighborhood holiday. We called it Freedom from Fines Day and celebrated with a block party right on her, now foreclosed, waterfront property. The judge had thrown the book at her, so hard we actually heard the thud from the back row of the courtroom. 3 years in prison plus full restitution of every stolen dime. But the real show? When Richard Caldwell took the stand as the prosecution's star witness, his testimony revealing how Karen had bragged about playing these suburban sheep like a fiddle, while sipping martinis at country club lunches. The courtroom gasped when he produced receipts showing she'd used HOA funds to pay for her Botox, security system maintenance in the books, and a $8,000 designer purse, office equipment. Meanwhile, our quiet hero Mrs. Chun became a local celebrity. Her homemade cookies now sold at the farmer's market as Justice Cookies, with the tagline, "So good they're criminal." As for the $217,000, we voted unanimously to turn the lake into a public park with a proper fishing pier, a kid's splash pad, and yes, a tasteful bronze plaque listing all the HOA rules Karen had broken. But the sweetest revenge came when the construction crew arrived. They tore down Karen's precious rose bushes first, and as the backhoe ripped through the soil, guess what they found buried near the shoreline? A time capsule Karen had secretly planted containing her vision for the neighborhood, a manifesto demanding stricter rules and renderings of her dream mansion, where our picnic tables now stand. We replaced it with a new capsule filled with violation notices she'd issued, a copy of her mugshot, and a single item that summed up our victory perfectly. The "No Karen's Allowed" sign, now autographed by the entire neighborhood. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Channel 7 returned for an exclusive, but the real headline came unexpectedly. As the reporter interviewed me by the new dock, a familiar face appeared in the background of the live shot. Karen's ex-husband cheerfully grilling burgers for everyone while wearing a t-shirt that read, "My ex-wife went to prison, and all I got was this awesome community." The ratings that night broke records. Just when we thought the Karen saga was over, her voice crackled through our car radios 6 months later. Welcome to Locked Up and Loud, the podcast where we expose wrongful convictions one episode at a time, starting with mine. The entire neighborhood collectively groaned as we realized prison hadn't humbled Karen. It had given her a studio audience. Her first episode featured exclusive jailhouse interviews, where she blamed everyone from the HOA board to the local barista, who always messed up her latte order, for her downfall. But the real twist? The podcast went viral, not for the reasons Karen wanted. TikTokers remixed her rants into disco tracks, memes of her mugshot with the caption, "I didn't embezzle, I redistributed HOA funds," got millions of views, and worst of all for her, A true crime YouTuber with 4 million subscribers did a deep dive that actually proved she'd underreported the stolen amount by $50,000. The episode ended with Karen screaming, "Edit that out," to her producer before the recording cut abruptly. A moment so iconic it became a viral soundbite overnight. Meanwhile, back at the lake, life was sweet. Property values had skyrocketed thanks to our new park. The HOA Karen sign was now a geotagged Instagram hotspot, and we'd started an annual Karen's Conviction Day potluck where everyone brought dishes made from ingredients she'd banned: citrus trees, garden gnomes, clotheslines. But as I flipped burgers at this year's party, watching kids cannonball off the new dock, I noticed a sleek black car slowly circling the neighborhood. The tinted window rolled down just enough to reveal a face that made my spatula freeze mid-flip. Richard Caldwell, fresh off his plea deal, smirking at our celebration while talking animatedly on the phone. Later that night, Zillow pinged with a notification. A home in Lakeview Estates is about to hit the market. The listing photo showed a familiar waterfront view from Karen's old master bedroom. The description? Fixer-upper with historic charm and colorful past. Perfect for investors or content creators. As I screenshotted it to the neighborhood group chat, one terrifying question hung in the air. Was this Richard's revenge, or was Karen somehow pulling strings from prison? The for sale sign on Karen's old property might as well have been a ticking time bomb for our neighborhood. Richard Caldwell's shady real estate listing, complete with winking references to the home's infamous history, drew every opportunistic investor and true crime fanatic from 3 states over. Open house day looked like a Black Friday sale at a haunted mansion, with people trampling the rose garden, what was left of it, just to take selfies in the room where the HOA funds were embezzled. But the real shock came when the winning bidder was revealed. A perky blonde influencer named Brittany K, who introduced herself to the neighborhood with a viral TikTok tour. "OMG guys, I just bought Karen's house. Let's make over her evil lair into a positivity palace." The comments section erupted. Half of America cheered as she painted over Karen's gloomy gray walls with rainbow stripes. The other half, Karen's bizarrely loyal podcast fans, flooded our Nextdoor app with conspiracy theories about HOA deep state operations. Meanwhile, Richard Caldwell vanished with his real estate profits, leaving behind only a single ominous clue. A Google alert the treasurer found showing he'd incorporated a new company called KW Holdings, LLC. The neighborhood held an emergency meeting, with actual snacks this time, no Karen-approved rice cakes, where we voted to install 24/7 security cameras pointed squarely at Brittany K's Positivity Palace. Not because we distrusted her, but because we'd all learned one hard lesson. Where Karen's ghost lingered, chaos followed. Then, on the 1-year anniversary of Karen's conviction, the unthinkable happened. A certified letter arrived at every homeowner's address, signed by none other than Karen Whitmore, inmate number 287463. The contents? A handwritten and heavily edited by prison censors offer to consult remotely on HOA matters for $200 per hour. The neighborhood response was unanimous. We mailed back one item, a glossy photo of kids fishing off the new community dock, with her old HOA Karen sign prominently displayed in the background. The return address? Lakeview Estates, now 100% Karen-free. As for Brittany K, she turned Karen's old walk-in closet into a prayer room for toxic people's energy cleansing, and accidentally went viral again when her sage-burning ritual set off the smoke detectors Karen had disabled years ago to avoid inspection fines. Some karma, it seems, comes with perfect comedic timing.